I could smell the banana bread before I opened the oven. Its warmth filled the house, mixing with the scent of pine cleaner and cold air from the porch. The old farmhouse creaked softly under my feet, like it had something to say but never found the words. I carried the loaf to the table, set it beside the chipped teacup, only one now, since Earl passed. And I waited. That boy used to come in when he smelled cinnamon. Now he sends me a text. Running late. Can you cover my phone bill this month? No. Thank you. No. How was your day, Gran? Just need. Always need. I looked down at the message. Then at the checkbook already lying open beside my Bible. A familiar ache settled in my chest. Not from resentment. From recognition. Somewhere along the way, my kindness stopped being a gift. It became their expectation. And I became the currency. They called it love. But love doesn't show up only when it's convenient. It doesn't knock on your door with one hand open and the other already reaching for the next favor. Ethan was supposed to stay for a month. That was 2 years ago. He brought nothing but a duffel bag and a promise. I'll help out around the place. He never fixed the porch rail. Never mowed the yard without being asked. But he always helped himself to my car, my pantry, my silence. And Patrice? She reappeared after years of city life like she was coming to audit a business. Talked about selling the property before winter makes it worse. As if this place, as if my life, was some asset depreciating by the day. I placed the warm loaf in the center of the table. No one was home to smell it. No one cared how many times I'd done this. But I did. I cared. Because it reminded me who I used to be. And who I still was beneath the silence, the patience, the habit of saying yes. I wiped my hands on my apron. Then reached for the little tin box tucked behind the flour jars. Inside, receipts, letters, old IOUs, even Earl's final note. 50 years of giving. Now neatly folded. Not forgotten. I closed the lid gently. And in that quiet kitchen, with the bread cooling and the floor groaning beneath me, I made a different kind of promise. One they wouldn't see coming. One I would keep. In silence. The wallpaper in the kitchen is starting to peel. Little curls at the corners, yellowed where the morning sun hits. I remember putting it up with Earl. It was the summer of '79. He held the ladder steady while I smoothed each strip, our fingers sticky with paste, laughing at how crooked the first panel turned out. We fought over the pattern. I wanted sunflowers. He said they were too loud. We settled on wheat stalks. Gentle. Honest. Like us. That wallpaper has held through every holiday, every burnt pie, every night we sat here with nothing but tea, and the sound of the clock ticking above the stove. Even now, when I pass by it, I run my fingers along the seam. It reminds me that once, someone stayed. The oven still works, mostly. It ticks twice before the flame catches. The same way Earl always cleared his throat before saying something tender. I keep a dish towel draped over the handle. It's old. Faded. But it smells like cinnamon. Sometimes, I bury my face in it and close my eyes. There's comfort in old fabric. In the way it folds, the way it remembers your hands. When Earl died, the world didn't end. It just hushed. The silence was thick. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to walk in and say, "Well, what's for dinner, sweetheart?" But that voice never came. So I filled the quiet with sounds I could control. The clatter of pans. The hum of the radio. The ding of the oven timer. I baked too much. More than I could eat. More than the neighbors wanted. Still, I knocked on doors with hot trays wrapped in foil. They always smiled. But they didn't linger. I started keeping the porch light on longer. Even in spring, when the sun stayed up past 7. Just in case someone decided to visit late. They rarely did. So when Ethan called, I told him to come. Not because I thought it would change my days. But because I thought maybe it would soften the nights. I made up the bed in the guest room. Draped Earl's flannel over the edge. Vacuumed under the dresser, even though no one would look. I told myself it was kindness. But now, looking back, maybe it was desperation in disguise. Maybe I just wanted someone to need me so badly that I let them forget I was more than what I gave. The second drawer in the kitchen used to be mine alone. Measuring spoons, handwritten recipes, a roll of string tied with a red ribbon. Little things that made the rhythm of my days. Now, there's a phone charger tangled with the twine. A vape cartridge beside my mother's biscuit cutter. A crumpled receipt for some app subscription I don't recognize. I didn't ask. I just moved the ribbon and the cutter to the back. But that drawer feels different now. Like something sacred has been touched without care. Ethan says, "Gran, you don't use that stuff anyway." Maybe not. But I remember where every nick on that cutter came from. The first time I baked biscuits for the church picnic. The afternoon Earl taught me how to fold the dough with cold hands and patience. That cutter has cut through generations of Sundays. It meant something. Still does. He borrows things without asking now. Last week, it was my sweater, the navy one with the soft collar. He said it was cold. Didn't see the point of buying another when mine was just sitting there. I found it tossed on the couch later, sleeves damp, smelling like his cologne. I washed it 3 times. Still couldn't wear it. Because it didn't feel like mine anymore. Patrice called the other day. She never asked how I was. Just wanted to know if I'd consider refinancing the house. Said Ethan told her the roof needed repairs. Said she had a friend in Chicago who could help. Cheaper. Faster. I told her the roof was fine. She didn't believe me. "You don't always see things clearly anymore, Mom," she said. Her voice was sweet. Coated in concern. But underneath, I heard it. The doubt. The way people talk when they've already decided you're fading. She mentioned power of attorney. Said it so gently. As if it were a kindness. As if giving her control would be a relief. I nodded through the call. Hung up. Then sat in the hallway for 10 minutes. Staring at the painting of the fields Earl bought me for our 10th anniversary. It's just green hills and sky. But the brushstrokes are so soft, you can almost feel the breeze. He used to say, "This reminds me of you." Still and strong. I touched the frame. And wondered. If strength is silent, why does it feel so invisible? There's a wooden box under my bed. Not locked. Just tucked behind old quilts and a suitcase I haven't opened in years. Inside are letters. Dozens of them. Birthday cards, Christmas notes, scribbled thank yous from people who once needed something and remembered to say so. One from Ethan, when he was 11. "Thanks for the new bike, Gran. I'm gonna ride it every day. You're the best." His handwriting looped and hopeful. That letter is creased and smudged with fingerprints. Mine. I've held it more times than I can count. There's one from Patrice too. From college. "Thanks for the care package, Mom. Nobody else in the dorm has cinnamon bread in real tins." I cried the day I got that note. Back then, a thank you felt like love. Now, it feels like an ancient dialect no one speaks anymore. I folded the letters back carefully. Each one a soft proof that I once mattered in ways I could hold. These days, they say love without looking up from their screens. They say, "I got it, Gran," then forget to return the keys. They say, "I'm just tired," and leave dishes for me to scrub with aching wrists. I don't expect grand gestures. Just a pause. A small moment of presence. But the house feels more like a motel now. And I feel more like a clerk. I clean. I cook. I stay quiet. And every now and then, I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror. Noticing the way my shoulders curl in. The way my voice has softened to a whisper even when no one's listening. Reverend Moira stopped by last week. Brought peach jam and asked how I was. I said, "Good." She didn't believe me. She took my hands and squeezed them. Longer than people usually do. Then she said, "You're allowed to want more, Geraldine. Even now." Even now. The words stayed with me. They felt heavy. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped wanting. Stopped hoping. Settled into quiet service like it was a calling. But service without respect. isn't kindness. It's erasure. And I'm not ready to disappear just yet. Not into memory. Not into silence. Not into someone else's idea of what I should still give. I sat at the kitchen table that night, letters beside me, and asked myself, when the people you love stop seeing you, do you let them look right through you? Or do you remind them, gently, but firmly, that you're still here? The dining room table used to seat 6. Now, it only seats 5. Ethan moved one of the chairs into the garage last week. Said it was wobbly. But I sat in that chair every morning. Same place. Same view out the window. Same cup of tea. He didn't ask if I still needed it. Just moved it. And now there's a strange gap at the table. Like something was erased, but no one wants to admit it. That morning, I stood with my cup, not sure where to sit. He looked up from his phone and said, "You can take mine, Gran." Like he was being generous. Like I was the guest. I sat anyway. Because what else do you do? Patrice came that weekend. She breezed in with a suitcase that matched her shoes. Hugged me like I was porcelain. Sat with Ethan on the porch, murmuring over papers I wasn't invited to read. When I brought out lemonade, they stopped talking. She smiled, too wide, and said, "We were just brainstorming ways to make the house more accessible." I nodded, though I wasn't sure for whom. Later that day, I heard her upstairs. Opening drawers in the guest room. Moving things. I'd kept Earl's old books in there. His fishing hat. A quilt we'd stitched one winter when the snow piled up to the windows. When I went up later, the books were gone. The quilt too. All boxed neatly in the hallway with a sticky note. Donate. I stood there a long while. Hand resting on the box lid. Inside, between a volume of Hemingway and Earl's tackle journal, was a photograph. Him in overalls, holding up a sunfish with Ethan still a boy grinning beside him. The corners were curled. The color, faded. But I knew that moment. Knew the way Earl looked when he was proud. I didn't say anything at dinner. They laughed about something on Ethan's phone. I smiled when I was supposed to. Passed the potatoes when asked. But inside, I felt absent. Not angry. Not even sad. Just hollow. Like I'd been gently lifted from the picture. And no one noticed the frame was empty. I washed the dishes alone that night. The water too hot. My hands red and stinging. And I thought, if they can box up memories so easily, how long before they try to box up me? The front porch used to be my favorite place. Late afternoons, I'd sit there with Earl, 2 chipped mugs between us, the sound of cicadas humming like memory. We didn't always talk. Sometimes, silence was enough. Now, it's their spot. Ethan smokes out there sometimes, legs stretched across the railing, phone on speaker, music low and thumping. When I open the screen door, he glances up, half smiles, then goes back to scrolling. As if I'd interrupted something. As if I didn't build that porch with these hands-painted, every board, planted marigolds around the base. Yesterday, I brought out a pitcher of sweet tea. No one looked up. I stood there, holding the tray, waiting for someone to clear space. No one moved. So I left it on the railing. Went back inside. Listened through the window, as Patrice said. "We need to start planning. Winter's coming." Planning what? No one asked me. No one even used my name. I baked a peach pie that night. Not for them. For me. The smell filled the kitchen like it used to, warm and spiced and steady. I sliced 2 pieces. Left them on the counter. By morning, one was gone. No plate. No note. No thanks. Just a crumb trail, and an empty fork in the sink. The disrespect isn't loud. It's quiet. A missing chair. A missing photo on the mantel replaced by a sleek candle I never lit. A recipe card tossed in the trash because we Googled it instead. It's being spoken around, not to. It's the way Patrice starts a sentence with, "We've decided," like my walls don't hold my ears. Like I'm furniture. Useful when convenient. In the way when not. At church last Sunday, Sister Rena asked why I hadn't sung in the choir lately. I didn't know how to say, because I'm tired of being invisible 6 days a week and pretending I matter on the 7th. So, I smiled. Said I'd been under the weather. She hugged me longer than usual. Whispered, "You're still needed, Geraldine. Don't let them make you feel small." But I already had. I was shrinking. Not from age. From being slowly, silently, uninvited. From dinners where they spoke over me. From decisions made with my roof, my name, my history at somehow. Never with me. That night, as the pie cooled untouched, I sat on the porch alone. Watched moths circle the light. And wondered, if no one sees you in your own home, are you still home at all? They held a meeting in my living room. Called it a family check-in. Ethan wrote it on the calendar in thick blue ink. Saturday, 3 p.m. Budget talk. No one asked if I'd be available. No one asked if I even wanted it to happen. But I still swept the rug. Dusted the corners. Brewed a fresh pot of coffee, even though they never finished the last one. I made cornbread that morning. Real buttermilk, not the box mix. Let it cool on the rack beside the window, same window Earl used to wipe steam from with his sleeve in winter. The kitchen smelled like memory. They arrived late. Patrice with her sleek ponytail and binder that snapped shut like a verdict. Ethan with his earbuds still in, one dangling. He nodded at me, didn't hug me. They sat together on the couch. Their bodies tilted toward each other, like they were already in agreement. I offered them coffee. Patrice shook her head. Ethan said, "I'll grab a soda later." So I poured a cup for myself. Stood near the mantel, hands wrapped around the mug, listening. They spoke in terms that didn't feel like home. Equity. Liquidation. Reinvestment. I recognized none of it. But I heard everything. Patrice leaned forward, gesturing to her papers. "If we start now, we could have it listed before the weather turns." Ethan added, "And if we split it into 2 parcels, the taxes won't be so rough." My name wasn't mentioned once. Not until I said it myself. I cleared my throat. This is still my house. Patrice looked up, her smile tight. "Of course, Mom." Then her eyes dropped to her notes again. They didn't ask me to sit. Didn't ask what I thought. I wasn't a participant. I was a formality. A name on the deed and a body in the hallway. I slipped into the kitchen. Cut myself a square of cornbread. Ate it in silence by the sink. Outside, the wind shifted. Leaves scratched at the window like they wanted in. I stared at the counter. Everything exactly where I left it. And yet, nothing felt mine anymore. When I returned, they were laughing at something Ethan had said. Private. Familiar. Excluding. I paused in the doorway, invisible. Even my shadow didn't seem to touch them. I thought of the rug beneath their feet. The one Earl bought on our 10th anniversary. It had soaked up a decade of holiday spills, muddy boots, tears after long days. Now it bore their weight. But not their memory. I turned away, walked the hallway alone. And I wondered, if they replace your voice with their plans, is it still your life? Or have you already been moved out, one word at a time? The envelope was plain. No handwriting. No stamp. Just a crisp white rectangle tucked between the grocery ads. It nearly went in the bin with the junk mail. But something made me stop. There, in small gray print, my name. Slightly misspelled. Just one letter off. That alone made my stomach twist. I opened it slowly, fingers already cold. The paper inside was smooth, too smooth. Official. Dear Mrs. Myles. This is to confirm the recent authorization to add a secondary account holder. I stopped reading. I stared at the words. Then read them again. Secondary account holder. Ethan. My account. My money. Our old checking account, the one Earl and I opened the year we bought the house. The same account we used to pay the mortgage, the hospital bills, the monthly donation to the food pantry. Now it had his name on it. Added without my knowledge. I sat down at the kitchen table. The chair groaned beneath me like it, too, had heard something wrong. I pressed the paper flat, traced the corner with my nail. My hands trembled. I reached for my reading glasses, heart knocking against my ribs. The details were there. Form 147B. Signed electronically. Confirmed by phone. Date, 2 weeks ago. I remembered the day. I'd been in the garden, pulling weeds. Ethan had come outside holding my phone. "Gran," he said. "They need to verify something for your prescription refill. Just say yes when they ask about confirmation." I had wiped my hands on my apron, confused, sun in my eyes. The voice on the line was calm. Scripted. I said yes. Just yes. One word. And now he had access to everything. The phone buzzed beside me. Another text from Ethan. "Hey Gran, I took care of the gas bill. Use the checking. Hope that's okay." Hope that's okay. As if permission could be retroactive. As if he hadn't slipped through the walls of trust I'd spent 50 years building. I didn't reply. I folded the letter once, then again. Slid it under the table mat. It sat there like a wound under gauze. Hidden, but not healing. The kettle hissed in the background. The scent of burnt toast lingered. Outside, a squirrel darted along the fence line, pausing to look in. Its eyes sharp. Unapologetic. And I thought, if betrayal doesn't come with shouting, can it still split something inside you wide open? I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet. Even the old clock in the hallway seemed hesitant to tick. I sat in Earl's chair with a blanket over my knees, letter on my lap. The words blurred. But the meaning stayed sharp. He'd done it. Not asked. Not discussed. Just acted. And I trusted. That was my mistake. I raised Ethan. Fed him. Bathed him. Sang lullabies when his parents forgot to come home. I gave him his first Bible, his first winter coat. I was the one who told him it was okay to cry when his dog died. He used to call me Granberry. Said I was sweet and small but still had bite. Now he calls me Gran, like it's a formality. Now, he takes what he wants with a smile. I thought about the signature on that form. He didn't forge it. He didn't have to. He used my voice. My trust. That yes, spoken on a tired afternoon, had become a key. And he turned it. I looked around the living room. Everything looked the same. The lamp with the doily. The faded armchair. The photograph of Earl and me in front of the old Chevy truck. But something had shifted. The room felt borrowed. Like I was sitting in someone else's story. And I was the chapter they planned to skip. At breakfast, Ethan was cheerful. Made scrambled eggs. Asked if I wanted jelly or jam. I said jam. He smiled, kissed my temple, said, "See? We make a good team." I nodded. But my mouth was dry. He talked about switching phone plans. Bundling bills. "I've been handling things so you don't have to," he said. Like I was a burden. A checklist. I watched him stir his coffee with the handle of my silver teaspoon. The one from my wedding set. The sugar bowl he used was chipped. It had a matching creamer once. Gone now. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. Because what else could I say? That I felt like a drawer he'd emptied? That I'd started hiding my own mail under the mattress? That I was too ashamed to call the bank because I'd be the fool who said yes without knowing? He would laugh. Not cruelly. Just casually. Like I was old and silly and overreacting. And that, somehow, would hurt more. So, I sipped my tea. Watched him talk about monthly limits and online access. And I thought, if someone steals from you with a smile, is it still theft? Or is it something worse? That afternoon, I opened the pantry door. Reached behind the flour jars and pulled out the old tin box. The label on top, faded, but still legible house papers, odd bits. Earl wrote that 30 years ago. His handwriting slanted, confident. Inside, things were not as I left them. Receipts were reshuffled. Bank statements from last fall were missing. The envelope labeled Life Insurance, Earl, was gone. The folder with the original deed? Gone too. I sat down slowly, breath shallow. The tin box never moved. Not unless I moved it. And I hadn't. Not since the holidays. I searched again, slower this time. Under old letters, behind photos of our first dog, beneath the folded paper map of Lanesborough we used to tape to the fridge. Nothing. I closed the box, set it on the table, and stared at it like it had betrayed me. The silence in the house had a new weight. Not the hush of grief. Something colder. Like someone had opened a window I didn't know existed and let something in. I opened the hallway closet. The fireproof box we kept tucked behind coats and Christmas ornaments wasn't there. I checked the shelf twice. There was a clean square in the dust where it used to sit. Gone. I leaned against the doorframe, steadying myself. My knees didn't hurt. But something deeper did. Something no aspirin could reach. I turned off the hall light and returned to the kitchen. Poured myself a cup of tea I hadn't planned to drink. Sat at the table where so many conversations had happened. And realized none of those conversations had included me lately. I thought of the phone call Patrice took in the garden last week. How she'd lowered her voice when I walked by. How Ethan changed the subject when I asked if they'd been to the post office. Little things. Stacked like pennies. Until the pile tilts and the fall is inevitable. I took a yellow notepad from the drawer. Wrote one word. Reclaim. Then paused. Underlined it once. Then wrote a list. 1. Call the bank. 2. Ask about fireproof box. 3. Check Earl's will copy. 4. Stop assuming you're imagining it. 5. You are not overreacting. I folded the list. Slid it into the pocket of my cardigan. The one with the torn lining and the scent of lavender sachets. And as I turned off the kitchen light, I whispered into the dark. If they've already taken the keys, how long before they take the locks too? The knock was soft. 2 short taps, like an afterthought. I opened the door to find a man in a gray vest holding a clipboard. Polite. Young. Not from around here. Are you Mrs. Myles? Yes. He checked something, then handed me an envelope. Delivery confirmation required. I signed without thinking. The envelope was heavy. Insidia notice from the county office. A refinancing application. Filed under my address. Joint names. Ethan Myles. Geraldine Myles. My signature was there. In digital ink. I hadn't touched a screen in weeks. I sat down on the porch step, the wood cool beneath me. The wind carried a sharpness first breath of Minnesota winter. I read every word twice. Loan consolidation. Transfer of equity. Release of partial ownership. Terms I couldn't fully decipher. But I understood enough. This was no clerical error. No misunderstanding. They had filed to restructure the house. Without me. I looked out at the fields, gold-tipped and rustling in the breeze. Earl used to say, "The land tells you when it's ready to rest." I felt that no in my bones, in the curve of my spine. I didn't cry. Tears require surprise. And I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. Inside, the house was too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum had gone unnoticed until that moment. I stood in the hallway and looked at the walls. Family photos had disappeared one by one over the past year. Replaced with abstract prints, Patrice claimed, brighten the mood. Earl's fishing rod, once proudly mounted above the mantel, now hidden in the attic. I hadn't been there in months. My hands reached for the banister out of habit. But I didn't climb. I just stood there. Halfway between floors. Halfway between memory and removal. That night, I packed a small bag. 3 sweaters. 1 pair of walking shoes. A framed photo of Earl, taken in '72 at the lake. I left the rest. Not because I didn't care. But because I no longer knew what was mine. I spent the night at Moira's. She didn't ask questions. Just opened the door, led me to the spare room, and placed a cup of peppermint tea on the nightstand. The bed creaked. The lamp flickered. Still, I slept. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of doors closing. I dreamed of nothing. Just breath. Just stillness. In the morning, I opened my eyes to sun bleeding through lace curtains. A robin chirped outside. I sat up, rubbed my hands together, and whispered to no one. When you lose the place that held your name, do you start over? Or vanish quietly into the space they left you? The guest room at Moira's smelled of lavender and mothballs. Not unpleasant, just old. Lived in. A crocheted afghan covered the foot of the bed. A small ceramic lamp sat crooked on the dresser. The kind of lamp that hummed faintly when turned on. I stared at the ceiling. It was cracked slightly in the corner. Spiderweb thin. Like something once held there had finally let go. Moira had left me a robe. Blue. Worn soft. With a note that simply read, "No pressure. Stay as long as you need." I folded the note and placed it inside my Bible. That morning, I didn't go back. Not to check on the house. Not even to grab the laundry I'd left spinning in the dryer. I couldn't bear the thought of walking into rooms that no longer held me. Not really. The kitchen would smell like someone else's breakfast. The hallway mirror would reflect a version of me I didn't recognize. One who said yes when she meant wait. Who nodded when she wanted to shout. I spent the day in Moira's sunroom, watching her azaleas sway in the breeze. Drinking lukewarm tea. Trying not to feel anything. But feelings, when pushed too long into corners, learn how to seep. They come through in silence. In the tightness of a throat. The sting behind closed lids. I found myself counting every cup I'd poured over the years. Every ride given. Every extra plate set. Every loan forgiven without asking. I kept thinking. Was it generosity? Or was it fear? Fear that if I stopped giving, I'd stop being invited. Stop being seen. Stop being needed. And what is a woman, after 74 years, if she is no longer needed? Who is she, if not the hands that baked the bread? The wallet that filled the gaps? The heart that never said no? I watched the azaleas for hours. Their petals moving without effort. Existing without apology. And I felt a pang so sharp, so sudden, it almost made me stand. But I didn't. I stayed still. Because sometimes, movement feels like betrayal. Too. Like leaving behind the version of yourself who stayed quiet for decades. Like turning your back on the woman who smiled through small insults and said, "It's fine," when it never was. Moira brought me dinner on a tray. Meatloaf. Mashed potatoes. A biscuit split open with butter melting inside. She didn't stay. Just squeezed my shoulder before leaving the room. Her hand lingered longer than most. And when the door closed, I let myself cry. Quietly. Into the crook of my elbow. Not from loss. But from recognition. Because I finally saw myself. Not as a victim. Not as a burden. But as a woman standing in the wreckage of her own silence. And I asked the empty room. When you've been generous your whole life, is it weakness to stop? Or wisdom at last? Moira knocked on the door mid-morning. She held a basket of folded laundry and a flyer from the community center. "The women's book group is meeting again," she said. I smiled, polite. But I didn't reach for the flyer. She didn't push. Just set it on the windowsill and said, "There's a seat with your name on it, if you ever want it back." After she left, I stared at the paper for a long time. A list of titles printed in blue ink. Books I'd once shelved at the library before I retired. I used to love the smell of new bindings, the hush of pages turning. Back then, I believed stories could carry us back to ourselves. Now, even my own story felt foreign. But I picked up the flyer anyway. Folded it. Slid it into the pocket of my cardigan. Later that afternoon, I opened my phone. It had been days. Messages blinked. Patrice, Ethan, an alert from the bank. I didn't reply. Instead, I searched for a name I hadn't spoken in years. David H. Barlow, Esquire. Our old family lawyer. The same man who'd handled the purchase of our house in '88, when Earl insisted we needed someone who actually listens, not just files papers. His number hadn't changed. I wrote it down on a sticky note. Placed it on the kitchen table beside my cup of tea. The tea had gone cold. But something inside me had warmed. I looked out the window. Watched Moira's wind chime sway in a rhythm too soft to hear. And I remembered. I still owned my name. My voice. My silence had been taken. But not my will. Not yet. That evening, Moira made soup. Split pea with bits of ham. We sat across from each other, bowls warm in our hands. She asked if I wanted to talk. I shook my head. Then changed my mind. "Do you remember Mary Olson?" I asked. She nodded. Of course. Her son put her in assisted living down in Rochester. She cried for weeks. I swallowed hard. She spent her whole life giving, I said. And then they gave her a room with beige walls and a buzzer for help. Moira didn't speak. But her eyes held mine. "I won't end like that," I said softly. Not as a threat. Not even a vow. Just truth. And that truth felt like the first root breaking through winter ground. Silent. But alive. The next morning, I found myself folding Moira's dish towels. She hadn't asked. But I saw the basket near the back porch and reached in, almost by instinct. My hands remembered the rhythm. Fold, smooth, stack. A ritual of quiet order. I used to do this every Saturday. For years. Before the noise. Before streamlining took over the house and Ethan declared, "Nobody uses these old linens, Gran. Let's clear space." As if usefulness was the only measure of keeping. I paused, pressed one towel to my cheek. It smelled faintly of rosemary. Moira dried herbs on the windowsill. The scent calmed something inside me. I looked around her kitchen. It was smaller than mine. Less modern. The fridge hummed softly. The walls were painted butter, yellow, and slightly uneven. But everything had its place. Nothing had been pushed aside. Not even me. Later, I sat with her in the garden. She showed me how to deadhead azaleas. "Snip just above the spent bloom," she said. "Gives the plant more energy to grow new ones." I nodded, but I was somewhere else. Thinking about all the times I clipped myself short. All the times I chose silence over dignity. I thought of the recipe box I tucked away when Patrice said, "Mom, no one uses index cards anymore." I thought of my wedding china in the attic. The way Ethan rolled his eyes when I said it out last Thanksgiving. "It's just dinner, Gran. Not a museum tour." But it wasn't about plates. It never was. It was about being allowed to care. To keep things that mattered. To be seen as more than excess. That afternoon, I went through the cardigan I'd worn to the church fundraiser last year. The one with the tiny daisy embroidery. Inside the inner pocket, I found a receipt. Stapled to a handwritten note. "Thanks again, Geraldine, you kept the whole thing from falling apart." Signed by Helen Toms. I smiled. She'd cried at that even overwhelmed, behind schedule. I'd stepped in, rewrote the raffle cards, served soup, stayed late to clean. I had forgotten the moment. But someone else hadn't. I unfolded the receipt. Taped the note to the edge of Moira's fridge. Moira came in a moment later. Looked at the paper, then at me. Reminding myself, I said quietly, that I was never just helpful, I was the hinge. The hinge? The thing that keeps the whole door moving, even if no one sees it. She didn't say anything. But she placed her hand over mine. Warm. Steady. And in that stillness, I realized. Dignity doesn't shout. It returns slowly. Like breath after grief. Like spring through frost. That evening, I stood by the window with a cup of lukewarm tea. Moira had gone to choir rehearsal. The house was still. Outside, the wind combed through her garden, shaking the hydrangeas ever so slightly. The light had softened. Late autumn always made me feel like the world was exhaling. I turned toward the hallway phone. It sat on a lace runner beside a ceramic lamp. The receiver looked heavier than I remembered. My fingers hovered. Then reached. I dialed slowly. David Barlow's voice was exactly as I recalled. Measured. Low. "Mrs. Myles," he said, after a pause. "Now, that's a name I haven't heard in a while." I didn't offer small talk. I just said, I believe something important has gone very wrong. And he listened. Didn't interrupt. When I told him about the account, the missing documents, the refinancing notice, he exhaled, soft but audible. You're not the first to call, he said quietly. And you won't be the last. We set a meeting. He told me what to bring. I said I would bring everything I had. He said, I believe you will. After I hung up, I stood with the phone in my hand. Not triumphant. Just grounded. Like someone who had finally named the bruise. I sat down and opened my old pocket journal. The one I hadn't touched since Earl passed. The leather cracked when I bent it open. I wrote the date. Then one sentence. Today, I stopped being a secret to myself. I traced the letters slowly. Tore out the page. Folded it into the back pocket of my skirt. Later that night, Moira returned. Her cheeks pink from the wind, voice light from singing. She handed me a flyer from the church. Legacy Planning Workshop. Open to all ages. I smiled. Set it on the table. Maybe I'd go. Maybe not. But the word legacy no longer made me flinch. I boiled water again. Made cocoa this time. Extra sugar. No apologies. When I brought 2 mugs to the living room, Moira raised an eyebrow. Felt like dessert, I said. We sat in her armchairs, not talking much. The clink of spoons, the hush of steam. And I thought about everything I'd allowed to slip through the cracks of politeness. Everything I'd excused in the name of keeping peace. I had confused silence for survival. But now, I knew better. Quiet could be strength. But also armor. And sometimes, it needed to be set down. That night, before bed, I whispered to my reflection. I'm not disappearing, I'm preparing. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Mr. Barlow wore the same houndstooth jacket he'd owned for decades. He didn't rush me. Just handed me a yellow legal pad and said, start wherever you need to. I began with the refinance notice. Then the missing documents. Then the digital signature I never gave. He listened, hands folded on the desk, the way a good man listens when something sacred has been disturbed. When I finished, he leaned back, sighed. We have options, he said. I nodded. Didn't ask what they were. Not yet. He asked if I still had a copy of the original deed. I pulled it from my tote, creased at the edges, but intact. You kept this well, he said. I smiled. Earl taught me never to lose the land beneath your feet. Barlow chuckled, tapped his pen twice. I'll start the process, he said. Quietly. I asked him not to contact Ethan or Patrice. Not yet. He didn't question that. Just wrote something in looping script on his calendar. Leave it with me, he said. On the way out, I passed the receptionist, young, kind, with coffee on her breath. She smiled at me, not like I was old, but like I was someone with purpose. That meant more than she knew. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves swirled along the sidewalk, brittle and beautiful. I clutched my coat tighter. Walked 3 blocks to the notary's office. Signed an updated will. Then walked another block to the post office. Mailed a certified letter to my bank. It was the first time in weeks my steps had direction. They weren't hurried. But they belonged to someone who had chosen to move. Back at Moira's, I made a list. A new one. With bullet points and underlines. Each task small, but not meaningless. Close shared account. Request account history. Remove Ethan's name from utilities. Redirect mail. I folded the list in half. Slid it into my prayer book. Between Psalms and Proverbs. That evening, I called the bakery down by Main Street. Asked if they were still hiring part-time help. The manager, Lori, paused. Is this Mrs. Myles? Yes. She exhaled. We'd love to have you. Come in Monday? I hung up the phone with both hands. Felt something in my chest settle. Like a cupboard finally closing. The world hadn't asked for my return. But I was stepping back in anyway. Not to reclaim what they stole, but to rebuild what I'd handed away too quietly. The next morning, I dressed with more care than usual. Not for show. For clarity. Navy wool skirt. Cream blouse. Pin of St. Bridget's cross at my collar. The mirror caught my eye as I passed. And for once, I didn't look away. The bank lobby was warm and sterile. Artificial flowers on every desk. I took a number. Sat in the corner. Waited. When they called me, I didn't hesitate. A young man with glasses introduced himself as Darren. He smiled a little too much. "What can we help you with today, Mrs. Myles?" "I'd like to remove a name from my checking account." He clicked his mouse. "Okay. Let me pull up your profile." He paused. Brows pinched. "There's a joint holder, Ethan Myles. Is that who you're referring to?" "Yes. I'll need a few documents, and you'll need to sign a formal request." I brought everything. I handed him the packet. ID, original account form, the certified letter I'd already mailed. He sifted through the pages, eyes scanning faster now. "May I ask, is there a legal concern?" "There will be. If this isn't corrected." His smile faded politely. Professionalism took over. He guided me through the process. New account numbers. Transfer of funds. Updated PIN. Printed confirmation sheets. It all felt quiet. Clinical. But each page I signed felt like mortar between bricks. Foundational. On the way out, I stopped by the safety deposit counter. Paid the annual fee. Rented a small box. Placed inside, Earl's deed copy, my updated will, Moira's notarized witness form. When the clerk handed me the tiny brass key, I closed my fingers around it slowly. Not tightly. Just enough to feel it was real. Outside, I sat on the bench near the bus stop. Pigeons bobbed near my feet. I watched them peck at breadcrumbs someone had scattered earlier. A man in a baseball cap nodded as he walked past. And I felt something shift again. Not dramatically. Just enough. At Moira's that evening, I told her what I'd done. She nodded. Didn't ask how it went. Just brought out her sewing kit and said, "Sit here. This hem needs another pair of hands." We worked side by side in silence. The rhythm of needle and thread like an old hymn. And I realized, taking back control doesn't have to roar. Sometimes, it's the sound of paper sliding into envelopes. The hush of footsteps down a hallway you used to avoid. The voice in your own head saying, "Not this time." That night, I waited until Moira had gone to bed. The house had settled. No footsteps above, no clatter in the kitchen. Only the tick of the wall clock and the sound of wind nudging the window panes. I sat alone at her dining table. Spread out my notes, my folder from Mr. Barlow, and a new sheet of paper. This one was blank. But it wouldn't be for long. At the top, I wrote, "Instructions for David Barlow, addendum to existing will." The ink flowed smoothly, as if my hand had been waiting for this moment. I listed names. Not the ones expected. Not Ethan. Not Patrice. But Helen from the church pantry. Darla who brought soup when I had shingles. Pastor Moira, of course. People who had remembered me without prompting. People who had looked me in the eyes when they said, "Thank you." Then I added a new line. Create. The Quiet Dignity Fund. Use it for women like me. Women who gave too long. Who stayed too silent. Who need a soft place to land when the world no longer remembers what they gave. I paused. Set my pen down. Folded the paper. Slid it into a fresh envelope. Sealed it. Wrote Barlow's name and office address in steady script. I'd deliver it tomorrow. No ceremony. No fanfare. Just a signature. A walk to the post office. A legacy, reshaped. Not as punishment, but as prevention. I stood, stretched my back, and looked toward the window. Outside, the yard was blanketed in silver. Frost had come quietly, painting the grass in soft light. I opened the window a crack. The cold bit my skin. But it felt honest. More honest than all the warmth I'd given without return. I reached into my coat pocket. Ran my fingers over the safety deposit key. Its teeth pressed into my palm sharp, certain. In the guest room, I placed the envelope beside my handbag. Laid my scarf on top of it. Tomorrow, I would tie that scarf around my neck. Breathe deep. And walk into the town where they thought I had nothing left to write. They were wrong. I wasn't erasing anyone. I was simply making space for what mattered. And in that space, in the silence that no longer frightened me, I began again. The conference room smelled of lemon, polish, and dust. The same long walnut table, though the varnish had dulled with time. Mr. Barlow sat at the head, reading glasses low on his nose. In front of him, a thin folder, neatly closed. To his left sat Ethan. Clean-shaven, dressed in a jacket I had once ironed for him. He didn't look at me when I entered. To Mr. Barlow's right was Patrice. Ponytail tight, lips tighter. She gave me a polite nod as I walked in. I nodded back. Then took the seat opposite them. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the office clock and the soft creak of my chair as I settled in. Mr. Barlow cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. He opened the folder. Pulled out a stack of documents, each clipped at the corner. Ethan leaned forward. Is this about the refinance? Barlow didn't answer him directly. Instead, he turned to me. Mrs. Myles, would you like me to begin? I nodded once. Calm. Steady. This file, he said, holding it up, contains all updated documentation regarding the ownership and management of the Myles family home and financial accounts. He placed 2 copies on the table. One in front of Ethan. One in front of Patrice. They didn't reach for them. Barlow continued, voice even. Effective 2 weeks ago, by Mrs. Myles' signed request, all joint accounts previously held with Mr. Ethan Myles were closed. New accounts have been opened solely in her name. Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it. Barlow pressed on. The property deed has been transferred into an irrevocable trust under Mrs. Myles's control. Additionally, a new will has been executed, and all related documents notarized. Patrice finally spoke. She's been under stress. This seems premature. Barlow looked at her gently. I can assure you, Mrs. Myles has passed 2 independent mental competency evaluations. She was clear, firm, and well-informed. I sat still, hands folded in my lap. Barlow looked to me again. Mrs. Myles has also requested that all future correspondence regarding the estate come directly through my office. Ethan let out a sharp breath. This feels like punishment. I looked at him. Not cold. Not cruel. Just clear. It's not punishment. It's restoration. The room fell into a stillness so deep, I could hear the soft hum of the office heater. No one moved. Barlow slid the final copies forward. I suggest you both review these documents thoroughly. There is nothing further to negotiate. Neither reached for them. I stood. Buttoned my coat slowly. Looked once at the window, the light had shifted. Soft and golden. Then I turned toward the door. And for the first time in years, I walked away without needing to explain why. The sun had dipped low by the time I left the office. Late autumn light spilled across the sidewalk like honey. The air had that familiar chill, crisp but not cruel. I didn't walk fast. There was no reason to. For once, no one was waiting for me. No messages. No errands. No open-ended expectations. I passed the bakery. The scent of cinnamon and warm bread followed me for half a block. I almost stopped. But I didn't want sweetness just yet. Not until the dust settled inside me. At Moira's, the porch light was already on. She was sitting on the steps, wrapped in a shawl, a paperback in her hand. She looked up. Didn't say a word. Just moved over, made space. I lowered myself beside her, slowly. Felt the wood creak beneath both of us. She handed me a blanket. Not asked. Not offered. Just done. We sat in silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Only respected. Across the street, wind pushed dry leaves in soft spirals. A boy on a bicycle passed, his scarf trailing behind him like a ribbon. I watched him until he turned the corner. Then I exhaled. Long and low. Moira didn't look at me, but she asked, "Done?" I nodded. Yes. Good. Another pause. She flipped a page in her book. I stared at the porch railing. Chipped white paint. Soft with time. I remembered Earl sanding that wood one summer. Bare arms. A jug of lemonade sweating beside him. He never liked shortcuts. He always said, if you do it right the first time, you won't need to do it again. And now, here I was, doing it again. But this time, the right way. Not loud. Not bitter. Just, with care. Inside, the kettle began to hiss. Moira rose without a word. I followed. In her kitchen, I found 2 cups already set out. Steam curled upward, like breath returning. We sat across from each other. She added honey to hers. I left mine plain. And together, in the quiet glow of lamplight, we let the evening finish itself. I didn't explain what had happened. Didn't retell the words from the table or the look on Ethan's face. Because this wasn't about them anymore. It hadn't been, for some time. This was about reclaiming the space within myself. The part they had tried to rent. Tried to name. Tried to repurpose. But never built. And I thought, justice, when it lands softly, still leaves a weight. But this one, I could carry. The following Sunday, I returned home. I used the key I had replaced a week earlier. The old one had been passed through too many hands. Inside, the air was stale. The kind of stillness that settles when a place forgets it's meant to be lived in. A dish sat in the sink. Half a coffee ring on the counter. But no sounds. No movement. Ethan had gone to stay with a friend, for space. Patrice left for Chicago, to clear her head. That's what Moira told me. Neither called. I walked room to room in silence. Not inspecting. Just reacquainting. The carpet held a faint trace of cologne I didn't wear. The bookshelf had been rearranged alphabetically, not lovingly. The photo of Earl and me at the lake was gone from the mantel. In its place, a sculptural candle. Minimal. Unscented. Indifferent. I found the photo in a drawer. Face down. Beneath a stack of menus. I held it for a long while. Not with sadness. But with a quiet sort of apology. To myself, more than him. By evening, I had dusted the shelves, opened the windows, lit a real candle, rose and cedar. It smelled like the better parts of October. I roasted chicken. Just enough for 2. Not out of habit. Out of choice. I set the table with the floral plates. The ones Patrice called dated. I poured water into the etched glasses from our wedding. Laid out 2 cloth napkins. But only 1 seat was used. I sat. Ate slowly. Let the steam rise and fade. Halfway through, I heard a knock. Soft. Hesitant. I opened the door to find Ethan. Jacket rumpled. Hands in pockets. Hey, Gran. I waited. He shifted. Just came to get a few things. I can come back another time if. I stepped aside. Let him in. He moved quickly, quietly. No eye contact. He picked up a duffel from the hallway, glanced at the kitchen table, then looked down again. You cooked? Yes. He nodded. I didn't think you'd want company. I didn't respond. He turned toward the door, then paused. Said something I almost missed. You look different. I held his gaze. Firmer than I expected. Maybe I do. He gave a small nod. Then left. No slam. No apology. Just absence. I closed the door. Returned to the table. Finished my meal. And as I placed the dishes in the sink, I thought. They will never understand what happened here. Because justice done quietly isn't meant to be seen. It's meant to be lived. The bakery smelled like something remembered. Not a single scent, but a blend: vanilla, yeast, heat, flour in the air like soft dust. Lori waved as I walked in through the back door. You're early, she said. I didn't want to wait at home, I replied. She smiled, handed me an apron. It was blue, with a stitched sunflower over the front pocket. I tied it slow and neat. The knot felt firm, settled just above the small of my back. The kitchen was already alive. Mixers humming. Timers blinking. Trays cooling by the window. She handed me a list. Muffins, 2 dozen. I washed my hands, rolled up my sleeves, and started. The first scoop of batter brought back something quiet. Not a memory. A muscle. The feel of doing something useful without being used. I filled trays, one by one. Set them into the oven. Closed the door. Let the heat surround me not like judgment, but like welcome. By 8, the front bell had rung 5 times. I didn't go out. I wasn't ready to face neighbors or questions. But I heard the greetings, the small exchanges. Morning, Lori. Got any banana nut today? Smells like home in here. And that last one. That stayed with me. Smells like home. Because it did. Just not the home I'd been pushed out of. Not the one where kindness had turned into currency. This was something different. Not a return. A rerouting. At break, I sat in the alley with a paper cup of tea. Watched the pigeons fight over a broken biscuit. The bricks behind the bakery were still the same dusty rows they'd always been. Worn smooth near the bottom, where heels and crates had rubbed them for years. When I stood, I touched one gently. Just to remember what staying in place felt like. That afternoon, I passed the church on the way home. A new banner hung outside. Every story is a second chance. Someone had painted it by hand. Brush strokes visible. Letters uneven. I paused beneath it. Let the words soak in. Then I kept walking. Past the library, now with planters on the windowsills. Past the diner where I once spilled ketchup on my first date. Every step quiet. But claimed. When I reached my house, I didn't hesitate. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, stepped inside. No one had been there in days. The air was still. But not stale. Just paused. I dropped my keys in the old ceramic bowl by the door. The one with the chip shaped like Minnesota. In the kitchen, I boiled water. Sliced an apple. Sat by the window and watched the light change. I didn't think about Ethan or Patrice. Didn't rehearse explanations or wonder if they'd understand. I had stopped needing to be understood. I only needed to be whole. And there, with steam rising from my mug, the scent of cinnamon in the air, I whispered to the quiet room. I remember who I am now. And the room, the house, did not answer. It didn't need to. It simply held me, without asking for anything back. The afternoon sun reached across the floor like a familiar hand. Warm, slow, unhurried. I moved my chair closer to the window. Set the teacup on its saucer with both hands. The radio played softly in the background, something old, something orchestral. No words. Just melody. Outside, the wind tugged gently at the curtains. I watched the neighbor's cat chase leaves across the yard, then collapse into a patch of sunlight like it had done something worth celebrating. I smiled. The house was quiet. But not the kind of quiet that bruises. The kind that breathes. That says, you can rest now. In the hallway, I'd rehung the photo of Earl and me at the lake. Centered this time. No distractions. No apologies. Beside it, I'd placed a new frame, empty for now. But ready. Ready for whatever came next. I didn't need to know the shape of tomorrow. Just that it belonged to me again. At the table, I pulled out a worn recipe card. Geraldine's banana bread, 1967. The ink had faded in places. But the memory hadn't. I turned it over. Wrote one sentence on the back. Still warm, even after all this time. I folded it carefully. Tucked it inside a small tin marked Legacy. The same box where I now kept my new deed, my new will, and a letter I'd written to no one in particular. A letter that began, "To the woman reading this, yes, you can start again." The church bells rang 4 times. I didn't rush to do anything. I didn't check the clock. I just sat. Let the air move around me like it had missed my shape. Then I reached for my journal. The last page. It had waited patiently. I wrote slowly, without decoration. I was not erased. I rewrote the ending myself. And then, for the first time in years, I signed my full name. Geraldine June Myles. Clear. Legible. Steady. And now, to you wherever you're listening from. If you've ever given too much. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home. If you've ever mistaken silence for peace. Know this. You are not alone. Your dignity does not expire. Your story is not over. It is waiting quietly, patiently to be told by you, in your voice, on your terms. So tell it. Write it. Live it. And when you're ready, we'll be right here to listen. This is Kamar FM, where every story is a second chance.